What are you doing? I am trying to decide which wine to buy. That's easy. Obviously go with the 19-45 Chateau Mouton Rothschild. But for the price of that bottle I could buy 1,000 bottles of the $100 wine, and then more people could enjoy it for a longer time. Well, if that's how you view your ethics, what should be the focus of ethics? Happiness or eudaimonia? Well, obviously Aristotle was right with his focus on eudaimonia. That should be the focus of virtue ethics. Why do you say that? The utilitarian concept of happiness hits the nail right on the head. Morality of an action is dependent on the consequences that follow. Bentham argued that actions have high moral worth as they tend to promote happiness to the greatest amount of people. In this, it is said that the intensity and duration put worth to how effective consequences of the actions are at the overall betterment, or happiness of the people affected. It is also a moral action if it goes to reduce the effect of the opposite, such as pain instead of pleasure, or hunger instead of satisfaction. The more the quantity of the happiness, the greater the moral worth of the action is. Other factors also affect this happiness, such as the purity of the action, the certainty of it, and how fruitful it is, or other words, how many people it affects. He also proposed that this happiness could be calculated and given a value such that it could be compared to other things. This argument may be valid, but it does not extend past the quantitative assessment of an action. There is no qualitative analysis of the action, such as how good is the greatest amount of happiness to the greatest people. That's where John Stuart Mill comes in. Mills agreed with Bentham that the happiness of the people was very important. However, he argued that people are different than animals. He argued that as human beings, there was also a need to add this so-called qualitative analysis of the action's worth. He then proposed that we as human experience more than animalistic pleasures. We have intellectual pleasures and they have more worth than any other thing. The pleasure one receives in discussing philosophical reasoning. This then comes with your ability of a human to put an intellectual worth on something. So for the case of the wine, the 19-45 Chateau Mouton Rothschild inspires in you more intellectual worth than 1,000 gallons of any cheap wine. It is the quality that matters. I accept your claim in the face of utilitarian theory of ethics. However, to expand the argument past the certain situation that is closely focused on only the happiness produced by a single actions, virtue must be addressed as to counter your argument for the happiness and discuss the Aristotelian theory of the eudaimonia as the central focus of virtue ethics. Speaking centuries before Bentham and John Stuart Mill, Aristotle spoke of this idea of eudaimonia, which is a rough translation of flourishing. Mill argued for intellectual pleasure having the highest hedonistic value. In this, Aristotle said that the ultimate goal of humans should be the exercise of the one thing that distinguishes us from animals, reason. Eudaimonia is the extent of giving this an intrinsic worth. The Mill you speak of agreed with Aristotle in that human beings were not only concerned with their own happiness, but the happiness of others. So how do we balance our own flourishing with the happiness of others around us? Mill took that into account with his agreement in the hedonistic approach. However, Aristotle did not discuss the happiness of others. Rather, he said that it was the individual who should focus on their human flourishing. But what does a flourishing life consist of? Aristotle believed that pleasure was a sign of a valuable activity, but it was not the substance of the value. There must be more there. In the case of the wine, there must be more value than merely the pleasure of enjoying an expensive bottle. So what then does virtuous activity consist in? Aristotle showed us that virtuous activity could be defined by the flourishing of an object, person, etc. at the function they were designed for. The expensive bottle of wine, in this case, is virtuous, because it serves its function to the best of its ability. Poured into a gas tank, the wine would not be very virtuous because it would not flourish as a substance that is meant to drive an engine. This can be expanded further in saying that humans, like wine for drinking, knives for cutting, and horses for riding, have a function. This function, says Aristotle, is to be rational. And we flourish, we achieve eudaimonia, through our ability to be rational well. Therefore, if I am going to be rational, if I am going to flourish, I should obviously think clearly and not spend $100,000 on a bottle of wine. Do you even have that much money to buy a bottle like that? I don't even own a car. I'd go with a boxed wine then. Will you buy it for me? Get a job.